Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to take a moment for everyone to log in and join the call. So we'll start in about 30 seconds. Thank you also to those of you who tuned in last month. We had a really great discussion and demo on SOC 2 compliance. So that video is actually hosted on our Uptycs website. So if you want to revisit that video or maybe share it with a colleague, it's an on-demand video with some great SOC 2 compliance solutions. Yep. So this month, we have a really exciting session with Saurabh, who's going to be walking us through this month's Uptycs Live on modern threat detection and malware hunting techniques. But before we get into that exciting discussion, though, let's give a quick introduction of myself and fellow panelist Saurabh. So as we introduce ourselves, we want to keep this session as interactive as possible. Please take a moment, use the Q&A feature down below. Let us know if there's anything you're looking for specifically out of this webinar. We can tailor this demo as we go, depending on how technical you want the material, or maybe you're interested in something specific in our threat detection offering. Please, please, please just drop a note in the Q&A box. We'll try and answer it all during the session. All right. Hey, Saurabh, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a really interesting background. Why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. My name is Saurabh Wadhwa. I'm a senior sales engineer at Uptycs. A little bit about my background. So I have been in pre-sales for close to 9 years, and I worked in the UEBA space, the threat intel space, and now I am currently working for Uptycs in the EDR, CWPP, and CSPM space. And I'm really excited to take you through the platform, and I'll show you how using Uptycs we can detect malware running on an endpoint or a server, and even like we do detection for containers and cloud workloads as well.
Thanks, Saurabh. That's a great introduction. I'm really excited for the session also. It's been great working with you the past few weeks and just seeing all the tools we have here at Uptycs. I'll give you guys a quick background about myself. So I am Jeremy. I'm a technical product marketer here at Uptycs. So prior to Uptycs, I worked at Deloitte focusing on day-to-day security operations and systems engineering for government clients. And yeah, in my spare time, I enjoy playing and watching soccer. So without further ado, let's take a look at the agenda we have for today. So we have a really exciting session and a lot to cover. So I'll quickly go over this. A few housekeeping items to start. This webinar is expected to go around 35 to 45 minutes. There will be an open Q&A at the end, but I've said it a few times already. Please use the Q&A box. Let us know what you're thinking along the way. If we don't answer the question during the middle of the webinar, we'll answer it at the end. So we just finished the introductions. Thank you to Saurabh. Next on the agenda, we'll actually move on to the key insights. So one of the things we found here is giving you these key themes early on, but you kind of see the insights manifest themselves throughout the rest of the webinar. So we want to give you these key takeaways of our presentation as early as possible. After that, we'll move into the actual discussion itself. So I'll be guiding this section on the pain points and the solutions around modern threat detection, as well as some macro steps around ransomware in general. Then we'll move on ahead to give a very brief overview of Uptycs solution areas. This will all cover around 10 minutes before I hand it over to Saurabh for the fun stuff of actually leading the live demo of some of our tools and solutions here at Uptycs. So we left time at the end, as you can see, for the open Q&A, but keep using the Q&A box, keep asking questions as they come up. So next we have the key insights here. The first thing we found when talking with practitioners and conducting research ourselves, there's been this dramatic rise of ransomware. And I think this garners a lot of headlines and a lot of fear mongering among our practitioner base. And the main thing here is this highlights the governance and tooling gaps. And we'll cover this in the hands-on demo, but what kind of tooling can Uptycs provide you to stay proactive in your environment and ensure you have best practices implemented across all of your assets? The second piece is about prioritizing behavioral detections. We know it can be difficult to actually tailor and build complex behavioral detections. And one of the strengths we have here at Uptycs is providing over 1,000 of these detection patterns out of the box for you. So what this does is it allows you to move quicker to identify and to respond to an attacker that's in your system or maybe actually trying to get into your system. And finally, the third part is about comprehensively increasing your security capabilities through scanning. So this one sounds pretty obvious, and you may already be using tools that synthesize your IT ecosystem, but a surprising number of practitioners are not comprehensively scanning their environment. And the important piece I want to emphasize here is they're not actually scanning for enough use cases, and they're scanning for far too few use cases. They may have a few KPIs or maybe threat indicators they're searching for, but we know it's not comprehensive, and their scanning piece just isn't sufficient in its current state for how mature their organization is. So when hunting for these malware signatures, Saurabh is going to give us a great overview of how to leverage Yara scanning. And the focus here, we want to reduce the tangible workload of a single practitioner and really give them the power to cover their environment. So in the next slide, I want to move into the discussion phase and talk about 3 areas of concern for modern threat hunting. And we can see how these pain points and how these key insights kind of tie into one another. So I want to pause here for the slide and cover the 3 pain points. The first topic is on this dramatic rise of ransomware. And this comes with 2 really interesting points of discussion. We're seeing threat actors becoming more organized and more resourceful. These advanced persistent threats are well-funded and able to quickly produce new malware, and specifically ransomware. This cause has 2 effects that we're seeing. The malware made public is becoming more sophisticated, and a lower caliber of attacker has access to increasingly destructive technologies. So you have these malicious actors trying to capitalize on the availability of new malware and not really fully grasping the ramifications of their actions. The next step we want to talk about when actually navigating your own landscape is detecting threat actors in your system. And now this could be threat actors attempting to access your system, or maybe even already in your system. So I want to pause for a moment. I want everyone on this call to imagine there's a threat actor who's gotten into your environment. Think for a moment, what controls do you currently have in place in your organization to detect their behavior? Who owns that process in your organization? How mature is that process? And then just candidly, how much confidence do you have in that process? What gaps do you see already? If someone infiltrated your system, how quick are you to identify and respond to these attackers? And one thing we're going to talk about in a bit is how do you tailor these detections and focus in on truly identifying suspicious activity? And then not stopping there, but once that suspicious activity comes in, how do you ensure that you're not drowning in alert fatigue and have the ability to respond to detection alerts? So the final piece is about threat hunting at scale. There are a variety of indicators of compromise or indicators of threat, and it's about understanding how to monitor and scan for that comprehensively. When you have a massive large-scale organization with hundreds of thousands of endpoints, VMs, micro VMs, and hundreds of thousands of users, how do you string together these behavioral detections to identify something, but also use the knowledge you have on hand for either a signature-based scanning or some kind of tie into an APT threat? You know, it's really not enough to be historically looking. You need to be looking real time, and this involves staying up to date with new malware signatures and being able to cover your entire environment in real time. So after covering these 3 pain points, I really don't want to just focus on the pain. Let's also give some focus on the solution to these pain points. Saurabh's going to give a great hands-on overview of the solutions, but before we get into that, let's just talk about them a little more in depth now. So the first one here, when we're talking about the rise of ransomware as a top of mind issue, let's talk about the solution of threat governance. Good governance extends itself throughout the enterprise, starts with a really strong mapping and grasp of everything going on within your IT ecosystem. When you have a comprehensive understanding of the assets in your environment, you're better able to detect and respond to issues. And a slight sidebar here, but I also view this as a great example of using a top of mind issue like ransomware that's garnering a ton of headlines as an opportunity to get internal stakeholders to the table. So you can use this ransomware issue, take advantage and maybe push the business case for increased tooling or funding within your org, to not just address the ransomware issue, but plug gaps across your team. So the next step I want to talk about is behavioral detections. And this is a really interesting piece that I'm excited for Saurabh to show you hands-on. Here we're focusing on catching suspicious activity based off a long string of these different behaviors that we've identified as unusual. This is a really powerful tool for threat detections, as it's a more dynamic approach to catching threat actors than maybe relying on known malware signatures. The focus here extends to tailoring these detections for your environment and being able to understand how threat actors move and proliferate across assets. So this detections piece also ties in nicely to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which we won't cover in this webinar, but if you're familiar with the framework, MITRE ATT&CK is a very useful tool for mapping detection behaviors to specific tactics and techniques used by attackers. So the final point is about combining the human and the technology side. We want to stay up to date on emerging malware signatures and amplify the reach of our security team to monitor our entire environment in real time. And most importantly, when we talk about malware hunting and scanning for these known signatures, when dealing with these lower sophisticated attackers that are reusing ransomware hashes or reusing signatures, oftentimes we may actually be able to detect the ransomware in your system before it becomes activated and the kill switch turns on. So we want to leverage tools like Yara that let us instantly get a clear picture of specific signatures on our assets and catch those known malwares before they become systemic. So if you incorporate these 3 solutions into your detections process, we really do feel that you become much more equipped to not just implement a detections framework, but become proactive in stopping threats before they become harmful. So that was a great discussion just now. Thank you for going through that with me, and hopefully it answered some of your questions around modern threat detection, maybe implementing the best practices for your org. So feel free to keep asking questions if you want to revisit anything or just hear more. Before moving into the live demo, Saurabh and I just wanted to share a quick overview of what all Uptycs can do for you. If there's anything in these domains you want to learn more about and we don't get the chance to cover during the demo today, please let me know in the Q&A box, and definitely reach out directly after this webinar. We'll be supplying our emails at the end of the call. But here you can see that Uptycs provides visibility for the modern defender. We're a cloud-native security analytics platform, and we provide coverage for the cloud and endpoint asset categories. So the solution provides a unique telemetry-powered approach to address a few of the use cases you can see on your screen right now. Starting on the right, we have the extended detection and response solution for those enhanced insights and visibility into your assets. In the middle, the cloud workload protection platform secures your hosts, your VMs, your containers, and your micro VMs. And on the left, we have the cloud security posture management to really simplify and ensure compliance in the cloud across all your assets. Obviously, today we're going to be focusing more on that detections piece, but you'll see a glimpse in how the Uptycs platforms quickly enables people to get a good sense of their cloud usage and cloud security posture. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Saurabh, for the live platform demo. How about before you take over the screen, why don't you give us a little background on this use case scenario you've set up for us?
Thank you, Jeremy, for the great overview of the platform. So before I dive into the demo, I want all of you to consider this scenario where any of your, one of your employees, one fine morning, he walks into the office, he opens up his laptop, and there is this email from an IT department guy which says, hey, your password is compromised. We have attached a form. Or even if he calls the guy using social engineering techniques, he got his number and he says, hey, we have sent you a form. Why don't you fill it up and send it back to us? Right? Or even a whaling attack where the CEO of the company was targeted. Right? They unknowingly download the document, which can be a docx PDF. They double click on it and they have no idea of what's going on at the backend. They have no idea that a malware is being installed, and the malware will sit there for a while, open up a communication with a command and control server, wait for further instructions, and then probably exfiltrate data, or encrypt data, and then the user won't have any idea. And the drawback is the financial loss the company will incur, as well as the reputation loss. So if there is no solution like Uptycs running on the endpoint or the servers, it's really hard to determine, what exactly is happening at the back end. Right? So I will show you how we can determine any malicious activity using first our signature-less techniques, which we do using behavior pattern matching, as well as signature-based, which, as Jeremy pointed out, is the Yara scanning. So let me share my screen and we'll get right into it. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Saurabh. And thanks for setting the background. I think what's scary is we can all envision that as a pretty realistic scenario. We always talk about kind of our end users as one of the scariest piece of security. So how do we kind of check and balance that using the tooling we have? Yeah, I think that's a great background and use case we're going to go through right now.
Yep. So this is the landing page of the Uptycs platform, and we are a SaaS-based solution. And so take, for example, right, the scenario I just described, but what if a solution like Uptycs is already running? First, I'll show you what all operating systems we support. And as you can see on the screen, we support all the major operating systems out there, Windows, Mac, CentOS, Ubuntu, even the Kubernetes environment, AWS ECS with EC2, as well as Fargate and then GKE, and also legacy systems as well as Graviton. So this is something which we are seeing quite a bit, where they are migrating to ARM-based architecture, and we also support that. So if the endpoint is running an agent like Uptycs, right? If I'm the user, I download the file. I can use the FIM capability within Uptycs to determine what was downloaded and what folder, what was opened. So FIM stands for File Integrity Monitoring. So under configurations, we have this thing called as file monitoring, right? Here we can monitor for changes to folders, subfolders, files, even if someone is trying to exfiltrate data. If I pick up this one, which is etc, right? Here we are monitoring for any changes to the etc folder, right? And obviously the subfolders, and we can also exclude paths, right? If you don't want to have a path being monitored by FIM, you can exclude those paths. And we can combine FIM with YARA scanning. YARA actually stands for yet another resource acronym, and it's basically a pattern matching Swiss knife for malware researchers. So here we are looking for different patterns, right? I'll show you how a YARA rule looks like. So if I go back to the configuration screen, I click on YARA group rules, right? So these are all out of the box rules, right? But you can totally create your own. If I open up one for Windows, for example, right? So here is a list of all the YARA rules we have. So take, for example, the first one, right? It's looking for the HTRAN malware, right? And here we are specifying 3 strings, like listen, trans, slave, connect port, or HTRAN. Condition is if any 2 of these 3 strings are present, then we know that it's a hit, and that's the HTRAN malware. So we do that, right? And as I pointed out, you can create your own YARA rules, and when the data is coming in real time, we'll do the matching and we'll give an alert to you. Then comes the piece where, for example, I downloaded a docx. I double clicked on it, and in the background, it launched a PowerShell. It launched PowerShell, and it also opened up a communication to a command and control server, right? So how we can detect a pattern of such events, right? So as Jeremy had pointed out, that we have behavior-based detection engine, and we have close to, as you can see, 1400 rules, and these rules run across all the major operating systems, the cloud, the containers. And I will show you how a detect event rule typically looks like. So, and to add to that, we also map these rules to the MITRE ATT framework. So if I click on this one, 7zip.exe execution detected. Here you see the MITRE ATT code, and this is for Windows machine. And in those conditions, we are looking for the command path ends with 7zip or 7zip.exe, or the version info contains 7zip, and the ancestor list contains any of these processes, which is a Word document, a PowerPoint, Excel, PowerShell. So you don't expect a Word document to launch a 7zip utility, right? That's why we are checking for those conditions. And the great thing about our platform is we actually record all the ancestors of a process, so that in case of a detection, we know how, what were the parent processes, what were the child processes, and how the attack spawned within the network.
So Sarb, in this use case that we're talking about, where maybe you have an end user who's downloaded this form, we would get this detection when they launch the form, and it also tries to launch the 7zip file and connect to a command and control server, correct?
That's correct. So there are 3 phases, Jeremy. First is the FIM, which will, if a user downloads a file, we will detect that. Second is using our this behavior-based engine. And the third is we have threat intelligence out of the box, and we curate it on a nightly basis, where we have a list of all, the known, bad IPs, domains, and we will correlate the data back to those indicators of compromise. Okay. So here we have specified the conditions, right? And here is the metadata. We select create alert rule option. So, and what we can do is, once the alert comes in, we can send it to various destinations, and that can be a Slack, PagerDuty, email, or a SIM like Splunk, Sumo Logic. So take a scenario where the malware was downloaded. It ran a series of events on the backend, and it was running on one particular host. So what we do is we combine all those event rules or signals, and we form a detection. So we take all correlated signals on a single host in a 15-minute interval, and we form a detection. So I will show you how a detection screen, how a detection looks like within Uptycs. So if I go to the detections tab, right here, you can see I'll filter on only the high detections, and this is the max score we can go to, like 10 on 10. I pick up one detection, which is Yara rule match on process memory Delta 68, which is actually a malware process. On the right-hand side, you see the list view. So the 7zip.exe example that I just showed is actually one signal or an event rule. But if there are multiple signals, right, detected on a machine in a 15-minute interval, we form a detection, as I already said. And you can see that the individual risk score is pretty low, right? If it happens one off, it's pretty low, like 0.1 is nothing. But we saw a chain of events happening. We combined those together and we formed a risk score. This is really high fidelity. And if you want to see where this particular signal is there on the MITRE attack matrix on the left-hand side, you can click on this icon. It will highlight that this is the technique hide artifacts under the tactic defense evasion. So this is the list view, right? You can see, okay, what happened? There are like 34 signals within 15-minute interval. But if you want to visualize it on the UI, like in a graphical view of, hey, what exactly happened? How the attack spawned within the network? What was the parent process? We go to the detections graph screen. Here you can see, on this particular host, which is named Sam, what exactly happened. There were 168 processes involved. 6 files were touched, opened, and the socket communication, right? So this is where we use our threat intel, where we look for any communication with a known bad control, command and control IP or any malicious domain. So here you can see that there was this SSH connection opened on port 22 to this particular IP address. And again, this is while doing your due diligence or investigating a threat. This is a really great way to visualize how an attack spawned within the network. And to get more information regarding this particular detection, right? If you want to ask more questions, you can go to the pivots tab. Here you can get more information regarding a particular detection. So for example, if I click on this option, what files and processes, I pick up this malware. I click on this option, which says, here we can answer all these different questions. When was the first time this process ran on this host? How many instances of this has occurred in my environment in total? So getting more context around that detection, this is a really excellent way. If I click on this, so you can see down below that there are 3 different hosts on which this particular malware was detected. Again, to get more context around the detection, this is really an excellent way.
No, that's awesome. And I think it's a powerful tool because you have these questions almost in a vernacular, natural language, and you go from having like a single signal or detection that you're focusing in on, and you are able to kind of step back and get that macro view of, okay, where is this happening or proliferating across your environment? So I think it's like a really powerful tool. Maybe one question I saw come in though, a question about how do signals, alerts, and events kind of build into one another? What's the difference between an alert, an event, and a signal? And how does, maybe a few signals build into an event or build into an alert?
Got it. Okay. So typically there is a one-to-one relation, right? And if I go back to the configuration screen, here are 2 options, event rules and alert rules. Typically, it's a one-to-one relation. And in the event rules section, we specify what conditions we need to look for, as we saw in the 7zip.exe case. And when we launch an alert, it will show up under the alert rules section. And there we can configure a destination. But there can be cases where you don't want to launch an alert for a particular event, right? You want it to be a part of the detection, but you don't want to see the alert. So for that, you can just simply turn off the option, the last one which we saw, the alerts one, and then you won't see an alert for that, but it will be a part of the detection as well.
Awesome. That makes sense. Perfect.
So that was the detection piece, right? But now, as I mentioned, that we have, like out of the box IOCs, right? Threat intel feeds. Under the threat intel dashboard, right? You can see the different categories that we have, indicator types, domains, IP addresses, the alerts, which are matched on the IOCs total. And as I mentioned that we keep the threat intel latest. Our team curates it on a nightly basis. We add new indicators of compromise. We expire the old ones. And here you can see what all threat sources we have according to the count. And if you want to see a thorough list, right, you can simply go to configurations and threat sources. Here you can see what feeds we have and how many IOCs we are getting from those feeds. So I just ordered it. And here you can see what all feeds we are getting, like malware, malicious IP addresses, newly registered domains, bad IPs, coin miners domains, and so on. And so again, like if there is a scenario where one of your partner organizations or even your threat intel team gave you a few indicators of compromise, it can be malicious domains, IPs, and you want to go back in time and search the data, like, hey, were we even was it ever there in our environment? So we have this feature called thread books. What happens is you can create a thread book, and in this case, you can specify the IP addresses, the domains, the JAR3 signature, and or file hashes. You can specify these, and you can run it across your whole data set and see if that malicious IP address or a domain or a file hash or JAR3 was there present in your environment in the last 30 days, for example. Right. So again, during threat hunting, this is a really great way of seeing if something malicious was already present in your environment.
No, that's awesome. And I think so. Another question came in kind of around tailoring these detections to my specific environment or to specific organizations. Maybe we can talk about the flexibility of the platform. And, obviously we touched on it a bit, but we give you so many great out of the box solutions. But one of the best parts of Uptycs is the flexibility of the platform and the ability to kind of tailor it to your needs.
That's correct, Jeremy. Like we have a lot of flexibility within the platform, whether it's creating your own rules, and as you can see on the UI that a user can go in, they can create their own rules, specify the conditions which are custom to their environment if they want to look for different patterns. And we can, once they create the rule, we start doing the matching right away. So we have, and even when I was going through the Yara rule, right, it's really easy and convenient to add your own Yara group rules to do matching. So we have that flexibility in the environment where it's totally customizable, whether it's rules, whether it's event rules or Yara group rules.
Nice, awesome. Thanks for answering that one.
Yep. So this is what I wanted to cover when it comes to like malware detection. So I covered, FIM, which is file integrity monitoring, and then Yara scanning, and then behavior-based detections. And how we can go back in time. So we have this feature called historical flight recorder. So what happens is we can, like, the data, all the data is there, right? It's not like we are giving you alerts, but the related data is not present. We are not a black box solution. We actually give all the data. And as you saw, like in thread books, that you can search across your entire data set for malicious IPs, domains, JAR3 signatures, or file hashes. Yeah. Back to you, Jeremy. Any other questions?
Nothing on the board right now, but yeah, if you have nothing else to cover, we can also open it up for the Q&A, and feel free to start kind of slowly putting in your questions. I know, like I said, a few folks have already asked along the way, but yeah, definitely keep asking questions.
Awesome.
Okay, one just came in. How does MITRE ATT&CK fit into these detections, and what does it do to speed up threat hunting? So I don't know, Sorb, if you actually want to share your screen again, we can go back to that MITRE ATT&CK matrix and kind of see what.
Okay, so we'll start with the event rules, right? And as I mentioned, like we have a dedicated threat intel team, which keeps on adding new rules. And as I mentioned, that rules are mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So let's see how many rules we have for attack. So we have close to 1100 rules, which are mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. And as you saw on the detection screen, we map those individual signals to the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. And if I pick up another example, for example, this one, yeah. So here you can see all these individual signals form the detection. And if you want to see, like, process using sudo utility to execute command inline privilege, where is it present? Again, it's a part of privilege escalation and defense evasion tactic. And the technique is abuse elevation control mechanism, as well as, yeah, so it's basically the same. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So there's actually another one too around kind of Yara and maybe understanding Yara if you're new to Yara. So do you have any good like rule set recommendations or resources to implement?
Yes, actually. Yeah. So there is this, I think, yeah, this one. So there's this a good blog where it's a great starting point, but you can find like plenty of resources online. And as I mentioned that we already have Yara group rules for different operating systems, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. This is also a good learning point. So here we are, like, for the example in this one, we are looking for malware FISBIS. And what's the description? There are the strings. So it's basically doing like string matching, and condition is any 4 of these 8 strings, actually 9, if present, it means we have a hit for the FISBIS malware. So, but there are plenty of resources available. But again, you can go and look at these, which are already there out of the box, and you can get an idea of what exactly is going on.
Awesome. Thanks for that. That's great. Yeah, I'm happy to share back again, and we can kind of transition to the open Q&A on my screen if you want.
Okay. Yep.
Perfect. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, well, I know some of you asked questions along the way. If there's anything else, please drop us a note. Yeah, I saw another one come in as we were transitioning. This one was around, okay, so we have the threat intelligence team that updates things nightly. What is it that we actually update every night? So do you want to answer this one around kind of the IP addresses and just kind of tracking APT threats?
The threat intel team actually, first, they add or delete rules, the event rules that we just saw, and the threat intel, which can be malicious domains, IP addresses, which are not relevant anymore. And as everyone saw on the screen itself, the added and the expired count, which tells us that, hey, how many IOCs were added and how many expired IOCs were removed.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think, one of the things we talked about during the discussion phase and when we were doing research on the topic was really staying up to date on the malware side of things and tracking these signatures and knowing where threat sources are coming from. So I think that nightly occurrence of updating and removing is a really important piece of, reducing the burden on our clients or customers for kind of providing that piece themselves. So I think that's one of our most powerful tools, is having that very extremely current real-time data to combine with the real-time threat intelligence.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I see no more open questions. And Sarb, thank you so much for doing that use case just now and walking us through the platform. I think you did an excellent job, and I really feel like I learned a lot during the past couple of weeks working with you. Hopefully everyone on the call learned a lot as well. So we have our emails down below. If there's anything in the detection space that you want to talk about, or maybe something interesting about the platform that we didn't get to cover today, please drop us an email. Feel free to reach out. And yeah, but that's all we have for you today. So hope everyone has a great week. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.